Welcome to another episode of Small Battalion. I'm your host, Sandra Battaglini, and I'm just thrilled to be here today. So here we are in the middle of the pandemic. We can't do anything or go anywhere. So what are people doing? A lot of us are mostly interfacing through this screen. I did a couple of shows last weekend online on Zoom, and I'm like, if I gotta look at another screen, I'm gonna scream. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to continue living like this. We need each other. And if we don't pay attention, the technocrats will succeed in relegating us to a virtual reality artificial hell. Not to be scary, but you know what I'm talking about. Those episodes of Black Mirror don't seem so far-fetched anymore, do they? I'm going to continue to cling on to the belief that these shows that depict a dystopian future, they lack joy. And that's not true. But some days, don't you find joy is hard to find at the moment? Now, I can't personally stop the march towards technology and a digital interdependence, but I may not want to participate in all of it. That's for goddamn sure. The internet is telling us what to do, what to think, who to believe, how to feel. I mean, it's so overwhelming. I've been heeding the advice of the shaman that I met a while back, Caroline Eaglesong woman, I know. And she was like, go outside every day and connect to nature. Connect to the water and to the trees. And I try most days. On the days that I don't, I suffer. But what is there really to do? Other than watch Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple, Hulu, and if you're in Canada, Crave and CBC, Gem. When this thing first hit last March, and we had nothing to do, it made me realize, what the fuck were we doing before, right? When now we're relegated to being inside our houses and we don't have anything to do. This is how out of touch we are. This whole Mishigas really highlighted just how disconnected we are to the natural world. And yes, Mishigas is Yiddish for craziness. I love Yiddish so much, and I like to inject it where I can, out of respect. Shpilkas? Come on, are you joking me? That's being on pins and needles. And so many of us are right now, and were back then. Speaking of needles, I believe that Netflix probably has a hand in stopping couples and families from murdering each other. You know, it's my theory that women used to knit to prevent them from stabbing their husbands, but just in case they needed to, they had a needle. Now, for those Yiddish speakers out there, if I'm using a Yiddish inappropriately, then please email me at smallbattalion@gmail.com. Now, Canada is certainly contributing to the offers of entertainment, but mildly. And when you compare it to other markets, you're like, what's going on in Canada? Canada! But why really? And in the past, it was Hollywood, and now it's Silicon Valley. At one of my very first meetings with the CRTC in 2018, I was complaining about Hollywood dominance in the Canadian media landscape. And Scott Shirtliff, who is now the executive director of broadcasting, then Chief Consumer Officer and Executive Director and Consumer Affairs Policy, corrected me saying it is Silicon Valley, or the FANGs. You guys remember the old FANGs. They are the new chiefs of propaganda, manipulating, brainwashing, destroying cultural ecosystems, most profoundly in Canada, but really all over the world. Sure, when you watch Social Dilemma, the documentary everybody was talking about for a while, those early techies believed they were doing something good, connecting people. One of my favorite parts was when Tristan Harris was defending, what they were doing. He was like, now you could order a car at your house and it would get there in a minute. And then I realized it actually takes me less than a minute to walk to my backyard to my car. So take it easy, Harris. A part of me thinks, how come these guys still get to be free? It appears that so much of what these motherfuckers invented is criminal. So how did we get to this desperate state of affairs in Canadian media? And how did America come to invade us almost completely? It's the greatest invasion never told because it was silent. They didn't need to use guns. Not yet, at least. Like we discussed in our previous episodes, in the early 1900s, English Canada was making films to get people to move here. And it was this early involvement by the Canadian government, according to historian Peter Morris, that was unique to Canada. He says, this uniqueness was rooted in the Canadian government's early adoption of film as a tool of promotional propaganda to attract immigrants who might otherwise be destined for the United States. Canadian government scenics and shorts became a nationalist substitute for Canadian feature films, which is the reason why Canada came to dominate the documentary tradition. According to Melnick, in 100 Years of Canadian Cinema, the book I go to, honestly, this book blows my mind. Two worlds were developing in Canadian cinema. A Quebec-based French Catholic one with an emphasis on approved mythologies for personal edification, and an English Protestant one with an emphasis on promotional documentary realism for achieving financial objectives. While Quebec was ideologically reflective, hierarchical, and inward-looking, English Canada was expansionist, financially motivated, and interested in film as an adjunct to nation building. Quebec film sought piety, English film sought immigration. So, how would you even compete to Hollywood? And who the fuck would even know this? I mean, I find it fascinating. This is why I love Canadian history so much, and why I continue to believe, okay, that our history, Canadian history, is so vast. It's so diverse. And you know, our academics really do cover it quite amazingly. But we don't see it reflected in our popular culture. And we don't have a system of distribution or of being able to, you know, remind Canadians of the archives of creation. Then what do we have to show? I mean, I've seen shows from the 1960s that CBC created that nobody even knows exist. So we have a plethora, a vast body of creation that is just sitting in fucking, you know, reel cases and probably just collecting dust on the floors of a couple of the broadcasters. Ever since I became a comedian and an actor, I realized, holy shit, Canada's not making anything. But when you look into it, you realize it's systemic. There's always a reason. You just got to take the time to look into it. And who's got the time? Right now, though, we got time. When I drive by the Cineplex on the Gardiner, not one Canadian movie is advertised, hardly ever. That's hugely problematic. If there is no greater symbol of American monopoly over our culture, then I don't know what is.
Canadian films have not always gotten the respect they would like. Often, good films simply get passed by, overlooked, or most frequently of all, overshadowed by the behemoth film industry of our southern neighbor. Can a new generation of filmmakers flip the script and reframe the narrative around English-Canadian cinema? Let's ask. Here in studio, April Mullen, director of Below Her Mouth. Andrew Cividino, director of Sleeping Giant. Kazak Radwanski, director of How Heavy This Hammer. And Charles Officer, owner of Cane Sugar Filmworks and director of Nurse Fighter Boy. I want to start by getting you all mad at me right away, okay? Shall we do this? Here's Simon Houck writing in the Globe and Mail. With few exceptions, Anglo-Canadians do not go to the theater to see movies made by their countrymen. The market share of English-language Canadian films at the domestic box office consistently hovers in the 1% to 1.5% range of total ticket sales. Last year, it hit 2%. That translated to a total box office take for all domestic English-language films of $16.3 million, or roughly what the critically panned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot earned. So we feel your pain. English-Canadian movies, in some circles, have a reputation for just being not that good, and that's why people don't go to see them. Accurate?
Canadian films are incredible at the moment. I think we're breaking waves, setting trends all over, the world. And in the film markets I've been to, the film festivals I've been to, we're innovative, we're raw, we're bold, and we just happen to not be seen in our own country. But the rest of the world is definitely recognizing us on a global front, an international front. It's just in our home turf. Well, the percentages are true. And I think that's the problem, is the disconnect between Canadian cinemas and perhaps not being able to be showcased in a way that we should be.
Charles, how disappointing is that for you, that your films might get more attention overseas than they actually will in your home country?
It's the classic story of certain artists having to leave this country to find their footing, and Canada's, long before I've started making film, it's been the story of films and filmmakers and the work not really getting the respect here in their country. And I think that, as Michelle has mentioned, in April as well, it's just there is a large disconnect with how films are distributed, and it's wonderful to acquire some international partners and people who actually recognize your work. But we live here. We apply for funding. We try to we want to tell stories that are Indigenous, and there is a disconnect. It's if you find that distributors or within this country, if you're taking meetings and they're literally saying we're only going to possibly take 2 films, Canadian films a year.
2 a year.
2. They'll literally tell you that. Well, that's kind of tricky. Well, then do you even care about the Canadian industry? Do you care about actually, really trying to take when Andrew exploded on the scene? It's like, there should be a mad rush to find out who and what he's thinking to do next, and getting behind and nurturing that filmmaker to actually, move forward and get to their second and third and take an interest. If they don't care, then the rest of the Canada isn't going to care.
What is that about, Andrew? Why would you have a situation where a guy says, I don't care how great the movie is, I'm taking 2 Canadian flicks this year, period, full stop?
Yeah, well, I think there are 2 things. One, there is some stigma around English Canadian cinema, and I think, it is in part because I think we have some amazing films. We have also made mediocre films, and I think that there's this double-edged sword where maybe sometimes we get behind and we celebrate mediocre films too, because we're really trying to get the films out there, and so maybe that adds to the stigma. But I think there is this generation of filmmakers that's coming up right now that is making waves on the international scene and really making interesting work. And the question is, well, then why are we still not going to watch them? And I think that's a question with a number of answers. One of them is marketing related. The reality is that a Canadian film, however good it is never going to be marketed on the same scale, because it is a matter of scale.
What is the marketing budget on your film?
The marketing budget on my film is bigger than the budget of the movie, and it's still very small. I think we had support of Telefilm and a distributor who were really behind the film. So you have a couple of $100,000 being spent across the entire country to try to market a film.
You're trying to compete with American big pictures.
With about $100 million marketing budget.
Tough.
And that whole campaign gets thrust from that American release over to the Canadian release. And it's something that's happening internationally. It's not just here. The middle of that film industry is falling out as sort of the American system collapses into these tent poles where it's as important to spend the $100 million on marketing as it is to make the movie, because the marketing is what sells it.
Right. Kaz, let me follow up with you on this. We heard Charles a moment ago refer to this disconnect between the fact that good movies are being made, but good movies somehow can't find their place in the cinema and therefore cannot be seen.
Yeah.
Why does this disconnect happen?
Because I think it's exciting what's happening right now in English Canada. I think it's hard to keep up with. I think it's new. I think it's dynamic, and I think it's hard to find one way to market it or to keep up with. I think we need to find new ways to support these filmmakers that are innovating.
Seems to be the case, though, that it's true. There are hundreds upon hundreds of crappy films made in the United States every year, but people still go to see them, and they still have massive publicity budgets, and they have their place, on the movie-going continuum.
Yeah.
Canadians seem to take pleasure in pointing out that when we make a stinker, well, it somehow speaks for the whole industry.
So, let's look at the early 1900s. I love this time. So in the early 1900s, America is using Canada as a location to film. And Canada is making immigration films. I'm trying to find these films, so in another episode, I hope that you can see them. Guys, I found a scenic. Entitled Whaling, British Columbia's least known and most romantic industry. Setting, a modern whaling station, Rose Harbor, Queen Charlotte Islands. Okay, so we're coming into the harbor. It's silent. This is why I can talk over this. Title card, heading for the feeding grounds 20 to 90 miles offshore. Now 2 men approach the stern of the ship. Is that what you call it, a stern? These guys are talking to each other. I don't know what they're saying. That's the problem with silent movies. Is the guy on the right a mounted police? Now he took his hat off? Who knows? Very suspicious. Next title card. The harpoon in the hands of an expert gunner presents a deadly appearance. This is the tool they use to kill whales. The drama builds. Ready for launch? Next title card. A playful sea. Ideal conditions that often attend the exciting pursuit and capture of these monsters of the deep. So now we got this very brave man at the helm of the ship, ready to pounce on an unsuspecting whale. They're coming close. They see the whale. Sharp! Dead ahead! Rings out above the roar of the sea. At the shot, the harpoon speeds forward and the good ship staggers from a mighty strain. So now it's... Oh my god, look at it, it's getting shot. This guy's like, how did I do? Pandemonium reigns upon the foredeck as the heavy 3-inch manila line passes over smoking drums. I mean, it doesn't seem too crazy pandemonium on deck. Reloading the harpoon gun for a second shot. And guys, this is the scenics that are getting people to move to Canada? This is the promotional piece? Yo, come to Canada where you can fucking blast whales. Oh, I mean, it is very scenic. Gradually, as the whale weakens, the gunner directs the hauling in of the lines. I mean, the gunner seems good looking. A last but futile effort. The whale, now almost exhausted, the harpoon is fired into a vital spot. Oh, God. This is so violent. And the largest game the world affords lies helpless upon the water. A heavy chain is fastened around the tail and the carcass inflated. This whale is just minding his fucking business when these fucks show up and blast the shit out of him. Oh, is that blood? Oh my god, look at it struggle. This poor whale. Oh my god. Towing home the air-inflated carcass. Oh my god, what is wrong with it? What did they do? The whale is tied to a mooring float. And the schooner drags home this motherfucking whale. This literally is making me vomit. These guys are like, move to British Columbia. Now they're hosing the beast down. Man, humans got so much karma on their ass for this kind of violence? For this kind of slaughter? And these guys are fucking tickled pink. They're like, look at what we did. The lower jaw and bellows like structure of the stomach. Look at this. This guy's fucking taking a rest. What a piece of shit. The humpback whale is of sluggish but sagacious nature. Their successful capture calls forth the utmost skill of the hunter. Look at the ridges in this thing. Unbelievable. Barnacles, peculiar to this species of whale, infest portions of the body. Honest to God, I can't even look at these fucking barnacles. No! I think I'm gonna throw up. Where the harpoon struck. Oh my god! This is horrifying. The sperm whale, the most valuable. A single specimen, often yielding 80 barrels of pure sperm oil. What is sperm oil? Flensing operations at the plant. Armed with large knives, the men began the preliminary cutting. Oh my god. Parallel cuts are made through the outer layer of skin and fat called blubber. By powerful steam winches, strips weighing many tons are literally torn away. Oh my god, you need this fucking machine to pull this. Oh my god. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Wow. I mean, I gotta admit, when I'm cutting a piece of meat, I do like when it does this. 70 tons of whale are turned over with the greatest ease. The immense bellows, like muscles of the stomach, force the stored air to and from the lungs of the living mammal. I mean, this is really beautiful. Blubber is cut up before reaching the rendering vats. This is fucked up. The carcass, denuded of blubber, still weighs about 40 tons. What, are they gonna put this on the barbecue and grill it? The mouth of true or whalebone whales. Now these guys are just taking a fucking smoke break. Like, ha ha ha, we're so great, right? The gill bone's known as whalebone. Huh. Okay, that's funny. Huh. Preparing whalebone from market. And what the fuck are they gonna sell? What are they... Oh, there comes the ladies. Oh, and are these indigenous people? And they're like, what the fuck? The flesh and blubber is refined in steam-heated vats. This is a disaster. The season's collection of bones are converted into bone meal, poultry food, and fertilizer during the winter months. So they fucking took this whale, oh my god, to feed fucking chickens? An old-time whaler who views with awe the modern processes of handling these monsters of the deep. Oh no! It's an indigenous man. This is the man they were referring to as an old-time whaler, an indigenous man, who did all the work. And it doesn't look to me that he's looking in awe at the modern processes. If there is no greater expression of the brutality and the violence that is perpetrated on the people and the land and the animals, then I don't know. So folks, this is the origin story of Canadian cinema. In fact, Ray Peck, the head of the Canadian Motion Picture Bureau, believed that feature films were the preserve of Hollywood and that Canada could not and should not compete. That's still true today on some level. While there is a hunger in this country to tell our stories, there seems to be minimal ability to make that a reality. There still is an overdependence on government funding, and what truly makes a robust sector is both private and public investment. We lack in both. Right now, there are so few places and outlets to experience Canadian culture because it's shut down. But big Hollywood productions keep on keeping on. American Gods have been filming across the street from me for months. And while I respect the writers and the actors on that show, it makes me so fucking mad because these motherfuckers stay open while small business are shut down, never to open their doors again.
Oh, you can be your own man all you want until destiny kicks in. Why don't you ask me if I need you? Why? Because war is coming, Shadow. And if I don't have the loyalty of my own son, how can I expect support from anyone else? Yes, I need you, Shadow. And besides, we're the only family we have.
Wow! Spectacular. New look. And I get it. White guys are not on trend. Evolve or perish, am I right? Sit. Great idea.
Understand, the more attention Wednesday gets, the more powerful he becomes.
So he has some traction. We put up a cat video of the old fossil's history.
Yeah, why are we worrying about this?
All it takes is for that old fossil to throw a lightning bolt into the power grid. And you're all offline.
Grandpa Viking, you're totally overreacting.
created by me for a specific purpose. Fail at that purpose, and this is what happens. Are we clear?
Obviously, American gods prevail. Now let's just take a look at what's filming in Ontario right now, and then you'll get the picture. Clarice, Good Witch, In the Dark. I was in season 2, not a brag, I had a small little spot. Lock and Key, Sea, Slumberland, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek, The Boys, The Handmaid's Tale, The Umbrella Academy, and Titans. Not a one is Canadian. Does that bother you? I mean, it bothers me. I know maybe you don't give a shit, but I do, and we should. And I'm not the first one to be upset about all this. We have a long history of people being upset and trying to do something about this. And then I got so excited because I saw that there's this film called A Man from Toronto. And I'm like, oh my God, is this a Canadian film? Not really. So check it out. The Man from Toronto, this is what it is. The world's deadliest assassin and New York's biggest screw-up are mistaken for each other at an Airbnb rental in Sonny's eagerly anticipated film. Featuring some of Hollywood's biggest names, the movie is scheduled for release on September, with production on the film expected to run until December 15th. So again, I get excited, and then I don't get excited. But this has been going on forever. There have been several attempts at challenging Hollywood dominance, but most of them have failed. In 1930, the Ontario government established an inquiry into film distribution and found Hollywood films marginalized independent producers. But nothing ever came of this inquiry. Big surprise. Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta brought forward provincial legislation establishing quotas for quote-unquote imperial films. But none of these provinces turned these acts into legislation. You know what I gotta say? Canada does a lot of inquiries and a lot of studies. But what happens to them? If there's all these inquirings, where's the answerings? In 1929, Sir John Aird, the president of the Canadian Bank of Commerce, handed the Liberal government of Mackenzie King the final report of the Royal Commission on Radio Broadcasting. It was this report that molded the Canadian cultural ecosystem. Aird worried, quote, that at present the majority of programs heard are from sources outside of Canada. It has been emphasized to us that continued reception of those sources has a tendency to mold the mind of young people to ideals and opinions that are not Canadian. Aird feared that endless exposure to American news and entertainment would turn young Canadians into little Americans. According to Strasbourg in Tangled Garden, again, my other favorite book, this preoccupation about the potentially corrosive influence of the U.S. on Canada's sense of itself has been the leitmotif of a debate that has continued for the ensuing 90 years after Aird aired out his report. The fundamental challenge of Canadian cultural policy was, how is it possible to have a country if the most popular cultural products its citizens consume come from another place? I mean, think about this, guys. Really think about it. English Canada has been made vulnerable to America because we share the same language and in some cases the same accent. I don't buy the accent stuff because we got a range of accents they don't got down there. Strasbourg continues. The relative weakness of English Canada has resulted in a strangely ambivalent attitude to cultural policy. Sometimes it's seen as an urgent matter that involves profound challenges to the very idea of an independent country. At other times, it seems as a hopeless task to try and build a distinctive culture next door to the elephant. I mean, we're more like upstairs. They're downstairs, right? Think about it. Fast forward to 2020, when the recommendations from the Telecommunications and Broadcast Review, sound familiar, are supposed to be tabled into legislation, and a pandemic hits. Everything changes, shuts. This is meant to be a modernization of the Broadcast Act and a modernization of rules that haven't been updated since the 1970s. And by all accounts, from what I hear, meant to be very positive for creators. I remember being in a meeting in Ottawa with Scott Shirtliff in February of 2020. I'll never forget this. And we were there airing out our concerns over predatory behavior of certain corporations over the broadcasting of Canadian comedy. And they said the legislation will be tabled very shortly in May. unless COVID takes over. And I'm like, yeah, right. So this too may never come to pass. I've been your host once again. My name is Sandra Battaglini. This is Small Battalion. We will bring you down the obscure rabbit holes of Canadian history when we get a chance, which is going to be often. Have a good time wherever you are and fight the power.